guys, I'm Desi and welcome to Bridging the Realm. Today we're discussing a very important topic which I'm sure you all agree we can use a little bit of more information on, especially in everything that is going on today with the climate of today. And that's it's called the Super Radiance Effect, which is really to do with the effect that mass meditations have on global consciousness and on our world in general. So I have my very special guest here with me today, who is Jeremy Oath. And Jeremy is a management coach, a psychotherapist, and a transcendental meditation sitter. He's also the CEO of Natural Health Research Trust, and he has been doing transcendental meditation for over 40 years and has participated in several Super Radiance projects. He's also the author of the Super Radiance Effect and Reinventing Management Thinking Using Science to Liberate the Human Spirit. He now continues to promote the Super Radiance Effect around the world through his worldpeacegroup.org. So feel free to please check this out if you want to learn more about the importance of transcendental meditation and the effect that it has on our around the world of humanity. So Jeremy, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
For inviting me. Thank you for inviting me. I'm very well. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much for being here today with me. This is, like I mentioned, it's such an important topic. And I think that we can all do with a little bit of knowledge on, some of the research behind transcendental meditation, how this all works, because I know there's still a lot of people who, well, for one, don't really believe that our minds can actually have an effect on the world around us, on the physical world around us. And two, some of the research that has been done already, not many people actually read up on that. And, when in fact it seems pretty important, especially right now with the effects that it can have on the world in general. So I think it's really interesting to get into this and just find out a little bit more about that.
Okay.
Yeah. So, well, first of all, tell me, what is the Super Radiance Effect for anyone who doesn't know this already?
Okay. So, it's the effect that's created by a group of specialist meditators. We call them TM-Sidhas. So they started by learning transcendental meditation and then gone on to do a slightly more advanced program. It's also a good bit longer. So they might spend a couple of hours in the morning, a couple of hours in the afternoon, or even longer. But the Super Radiance Effect comes from when there's a group of them meditating together all at the same time. And what we've discovered is that when they do that, they have an impact on the rest of society around them. And the larger the group, the wider and deeper that impact goes. So, my hometown of Bournemouth, say, it's, 500,000 people or whatever, we might only need about 80 people. The actual formula for predicting the effect is the square root of 1%. So we take 1% and square root it. So for Bournemouth, that's about 70, 80 people, if I remember rightly. And that's enough to actually have an influence on everybody else in the town. We can measure that very easily because we can look at crime statistics, accident and emergency admissions, even insurance claims, all kinds of publicly available statistics tend to start moving in the right direction once we get the Super Radiance Effect. It's almost instant. In fact, at one point, my slogan was "World Peace in 24 hours," because that's how long it'll take if we get the right number of people. And that's proven again because, crime statistics and all the rest of it are take some time to collect. But when you look back retrospectively at the situation, when the Siddhas arrive in an area and start doing group program together, things start happening overnight. So, for instance, in war zones where we've been in the past to try and create a peaceful effect, the number of deaths goes down to sort of zero almost straight away, and that's within a day or so. I was on a project in Croatia during their civil war, with the split up of the Yugoslavia back in the 90s, and when we reached the square root of 1% of the Croatian population, fighting stopped everywhere, absolutely dead. And that day Germany, I think, announced that they would support Croatia as an independent country, and everybody else fell in. All the other countries fell in shortly after that, and that created a structure for Croatia, which they then have built on. And the fighting, although after we left, the fighting resumed for a while, but it was in a much smaller scale, and it sort of petered out naturally. So these things happen very, very quickly, and they're very measurable, and they're very predictable. So that's why we say it's very scientific. So although it's quite controversial in terms of how does this work, well, people do know, but they've got their own theories and speculation, things like that. The evidence is completely cast iron. It's absolutely rock solid. And I started looking at their 1%, the earliest studies. They're beautiful. I mean, it's like Maharishi predicted that if we can get 1% of a population to meditate, it'll start to transform society. So there was a wave of teaching in America in the early 70s. So a couple of guys realized, wow, we must have one or two towns now that have got this 1% effect. So they came across 11 that had taught at least 1% of the population. So they ranging a population of between 20 and 50,000 or something like that. So they took statistics from every town in America in that population band, and there were 101 cities, of which 11 were these. And sure enough, what happened was all the 11 collectively had come down a bit, and all the other 90 had gone up in terms of crime. And then when they took 11 of the 90 and matched them with the 11 that had learned to meditate in terms of age of population and college population, one or two other things. They try and geographic location. So they would try. They found the change was even greater. But in some cases, two cases, crime had gone up 20% in one of the other two towns, and in one case it had gone down 15% in the meditating town. I said, God, you don't need more than that. Okay, so it's a one-off experiment. So let's try another one. So they did another one, and then they do another one. The other one had 48 towns, I think, in it that were meditating. And it's just...
the results are there, isn't it? The evidence is there. It's
just people can't see it, so that's a shame. And then there was the Jerusalem study, where you saw that one where the numbers in the program are going up and down, up and down, up and down, and it matched entirely the number of ward deaths going on in 11. It's just peach.
Yeah, it's crazy. Wow. I mean, it's just so obvious, and it's right there in front of our eyes. It is the easiest thing that anyone can do. You don't need any guns or
yeah, that's right. That's right.
It's just meditation.
That's right. That's right. There's not just one study or two studies or half a dozen studies. There's about 50 studies done around the world, and also laboratory tests. So we can actually measure a TM-Sidha when they're meditating has improvements to their brainwave coherence. So, okay, if they're having an effect on the rest of the population, then what you might think is then the rest of the population will register changes as well. So they've, on a national project in America, they were checking other non-meditators, I think, 2,000 miles away. And every time the people in Iowa, in the center of America, every time they meditated, these people's brain waves started to become coherent at the same time. So it really is that, and it's like flicking on a light switch. You can rely on it. It's absolutely rely on it. And I suppose in a sense, without even realizing it, became to rely on it, because I remember the Croatian one particularly. It was, if you remember the Bosnian conflict, do you? Have you heard of Bosnia and the Serbian conflict and the rest of it? They were terrible. Croatia was going that way. It was actually the first sort of civil war that erupted in the Balkans. And it was looking to be really bad. And I remember a fax coming through saying, Croatian TM movement would like people to go over there and meditate and support. They were training up their own siddhas, you see. So I just thought, oh, great, that'd be a good way. So off I went. And it was really only when we got to the border between Italy and there was a small group of us coming from England, about 15 of us, I think, in a little minibus. We were just crossing the border. It only began to dawn on me then that actually I was driving into a war zone. But so, you know, I thought, oh gosh. The car in front was stopped. They were, you know, the border guards were there, all heavily armed, and the guy in front of us was stopped, and he got out of the car, and we could just see them waving their arms about and things like that. And he opened his boot. It was just full of guns, absolutely packed with guns. And the guys patted him on the back and, you know, gave him the thumbs up. So off he drove. And then we drove up and said, well, why are you coming to Croatia? He said, we're tourists. He tapped his head and told us to go on. So we arrived at the hotel and all the lights were out because they were expecting an air raid. Being a civil war, everybody knew everybody else, so, you know, phone calls were made and things like that. So they're expecting an air raid, and we just went straight into our what we call our program room and did our program. And I think there were about 20 towns that were bombed that night, but not our town. It was okay.
Coincidence or?
Absolutely coincidence. A lucky coincidence, actually. So, and we were in a garrison town as well, a naval garrison town. So it was a target, you know, it was a strategic target, but it you know, somehow somebody forgot to drop bombs on Pula that day. So, and the whole time we were there, not a shot was fired in our town. And the Navy, it was the Yugoslav Navy or the Serbian Navy, you know, the Federal Navy, gradually pulled out, and there was nobody left in the garrison by the time we left. So it just stopped. And as our group grew, we hadn't got the Croatian Super Radiance number there. I can't remember how many people it was, about 300 people. So we were still only 50 or 60. But as it grew, I kept a record actually of the events going on, and bit by bit the fighting stopped in a wider and wider circle away from us until we finally hit the Super Radiance Effect for the whole country.
Wow.
I remember the BBC announcing there was no fighting in Croatia today. You know, whoopee, big achievement. And,
but I bet they failed to mention who, because of who.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. There were all these guys with white helmets rushing around, and actually in our hotel, and you know, they hadn't a clue what was going on because we'd all shuffle off into the meditation room and close the doors and be total silent for the rest of the day. You know, I mean, we'd spend all day meditating in a situation like that. You know. You don't feel safe doing anything else, to be honest. So,
yeah, I can imagine. And that's pretty brave to go into a country that's, you know, there's war going on, and you kind of...
Well, I think that's why I told the story, because it wasn't bravery at all. It was just matter of fact, that it is so matter of fact that when we do it, it works. So it's almost like, you know, if you're going to cross the road, it is dangerous to cross the road, so actually you do look, you know, left, right and left again, and only walk across when it's clear and it's perfectly safe. That's just matter of fact. It's not a magic thing or a you know, coincidence or whatever. I didn't get hit crossing the road, how fantastic. Well, it's because you took precautions. Well, the precaution is you meditate, and if there's enough of you, everything's fine. Everything's absolutely fine.
That's really powerful. And that's, I mean, so have you guys ever, did you at any point try to present these statistics, these, you know, what you were doing to the government there? Or
Only about 1,000 times, I would think. All over the world, they're just not listening. So it's just completely beyond. I remember in the hotel where we were staying in Croatia, there was a guy there who was reading a book, and he was in the foyer, and he was sort of always hanging around, and I asked him where he worked. He said, I'm in the Foreign Office. And basically, he was a spy, you know, British. He worked for the it's the Foreign Secretary's private office or whatever it was, which is sort of, you know, that. So he was from MI6 or whatever it was. He hadn't a clue what was going on. He was reading a novel, you know, he was waiting for something to happen, and of course it didn't. So he left. But you know, it's they can't hear it, and I mean, I touch on that in my book. Actually, it's to do with the brain's way of filtering out information, that we rely on our beliefs to be able to process information. And where the evidence, shall we say, the facts of the situation conflict with our beliefs, our brain actually filters out the facts. And it's called confirmation bias. And it's very common. In my management work, I come across it with managers thinking that they're running a business in a particular way, but they're evidently not. But they can't see that because their belief is that I'm a jolly good manager and everyone loves me and I'm do the best I can. And so it happens in every sphere of life. So when you get to something that's as weird as this, in the sense that, you know, we're not used to telepathy, although it's not telepathy, but we're not used to this sort of broadcast effect. It also isn't part of our sensory perception. And of course, we rely on our sensory perception. You know, we can see one another, so we know each other's exist, you know, but if you can't see this, you can't smell it, you can't taste it, you've never heard about it before, and all sounds rather strange, it's much easier to just ignore it or disbelieve it or laugh at it, which is what they do. But I don't think it excuses them these days, because they're actually paid quite large sums of money on an annual basis to look after our interests. And it's really time they started looking at the evidence and saying, right, okay, although I don't believe it, why don't we give it a go, you know? And so I've asked somebody in the government if we could do a pilot study for the coronavirus. Although none of the research projects were really about infectious diseases, but a couple did mention it in their studies, and in both cases the infectious disease went down. But that was under normal conditions. It wasn't during a pandemic or an epidemic. So it'd be really interesting to know what effect super radiance would have on an epidemic, and it really wouldn't cost very much to set up a trial study and observe it directly, you know, and it could be done in weeks.
Yeah, that would be pretty amazing. So you're currently waiting to hear back from the government from the UK government about this.
I'm not waiting, no. I've written, you know, and, you know, if they come back, they'll come back. But you know, I'm not holding my breath, as they say.
Yeah. Oh God.
Yeah.
I mean, it's insane, isn't it? Because just what you mentioned about how, you know, our beliefs can be stronger than actual facts, the natural scientific facts that have been proven, you know, in a laboratory, in an experiment, in dozens of experiments. Yet if it conflicts with our beliefs, we're still just willing to ignore it completely.
Yeah.
And it's insane.
It's automatically. It's not that we're willing to ignore it so much as our brain actually filters out the evidence. It creates something called cognitive dissonance, if you've heard that. So that's why cognitive dissonance is really the stress created in the brain when it comes up against something it doesn't believe in. And it has two options. One is to go along with the evidence, which is painful. Look, people get very attached to their beliefs. You know, every war that's being fought is usually over some belief or other, whether it's religious or nationalistic or whatever, communist, or, you know, people get very caught up in, you know, here in Northern Ireland, we've had troubles every now and again. Last troubles lasted about 30 years, all because of their beliefs about one thing or another. So people don't give up their beliefs lightly. So, okay, those are, say, important beliefs, whereas these are sort of very mundane. You know, you can't possibly influence someone 2,000 miles away just by sitting with your eyes shut. But nevertheless, it's still there. So it's a disbelief, which is the same as a belief, isn't it? And so what that does, it creates a sort of a crisis, a stress response. And then the stress response, people get angry. They'll get really upset about. Try talking to a doctor about natural medicine, about the evidence of natural medicine. They don't want to hear it. It's the same effect, and you get different responses. Some doctors will get really angry, get upset. Oh, that's rubbish! Blah, 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 blah. Start shouting stuff. Okay, back off. Others, their eyes just glaze over, and they sort of smile. Yeah, that's nice. And then on to the next subject. They just don't want to hear it. So that's the cognitive dissonance thing, and it's not a willful thing. It is automatic. It's part of our autonomous nervous system, I suppose.
Yeah, it's like an automatic denial, isn't it? That it's
Yeah.
like it's almost like your whole life has been threatened, so you're just
Yes.
like
Yeah. When your beliefs are threatened, your whole life's threatened.
yeah.
In psychology or psychotherapy terms, our beliefs are one of our essential needs. We've got sort of 12 roughly emotional needs, biological needs. Actually, having a belief system is one of them. It enables us to make sense of our lives. It creates purpose in our life, and it creates some sort of orderliness. So that when you're threatening a fundamental belief, it is a threat, and it's that threat that triggers the stress response. So, okay, what's the way around it? Well, the way around it is to learn to meditate. Oh dear, that's a shame, because they don't want to do that. But other way around it is just to avalanche people with facts. One way I get around is in my management work, because I do planning workshops, to get the management to understand that the way they're running the company isn't possibly the best way of doing it. We get feedback from every member of staff, and we get it in writing. So when we run our first planning workshop, the senior management team sit down and they're reading every one of these pieces of paper, and it is a drip, drip, drip effect. If enough people are saying things aren't working very well, they begin to realize things aren't working very well. And that's really why I set up the World Peace Group website, is just to try and get this information out there. So the more familiar it is to people, the less it's threatening to them. And hasn't worked yet, but we're getting there.
Yeah, no, but it's got some really amazing information. And I remember when I first came across it, I was like, wow, finally a website that talks about just this and how important it actually is. Because I've heard about it from before. People kind of mention it every now and then and say there's a few studies that have been done, but no one really knows where they are, when.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Right.
And it's really amazing that you've said
this.
Yeah,
a lot of people have heard about the Washington Project, the Washington Crime. Yeah, and it's amazing how somehow that's got into people's consciousness, and people say, "Oh, is that the Washington thing?" Yeah, and we've got that on the website, and it's had 4,500 likes, whereas others get 30 or 50, or it's in fact, I think I've had 16,000 people on it this month visiting that page. I mean, there's been a real spike. Probably everyone's in lockdown and they're beginning to sort of
research for themselves.
Yeah, that's right. They're looking at things like this for once, and it's interesting because it's actually not a very good study as far as I can see, because it's the super radiance effect is about the square root of 1%. Well, we had 4,000 people in Washington, so that's a lot more than the square root of 1%. But there are reasons why that happened. Washington is the capital of the United States of America, so you need a bigger group to be able to, because really everything that goes on in America sort of starts and finishes in Washington, and Washington is also the center of huge international network of all kinds of things that the American government get up to in just about every other country. And so you actually need more people than I think the square root of 1% for Washington is 400 people or something like that. So we were 10 times the amount. So in terms of pure research,
that's a weak one, more or less.
Yeah, it's a weak one. But we brought the crime rate down, and there's that wonderful quote by the police commissioner in the area. Said, we told him the organisers told him, look, this is what we're trying to achieve. We're going to try and create a 20% drop in crime during the summer. And he said, well, he said the only way you can do that is have 20 inches of snow or something like that, And on that particular course, I remember the police would announce the crime rate every day. They'd tell you, how many people got killed or whatever, or to the press it would be related. And halfway through the project, they just stopped doing it because they couldn't rely on their figures. They thought something's going wrong here. We're not picking up, the right information. So
So they saw for themselves that it actually had an effect.
Yeah. I'm not sure they ever admitted it in the end, but they stopped publishing it. But it's like little practical things, which I love. It's leaving the airport. A taxi driver, came up. I was getting in the taxi. Where do you want to go? I told him where I was going. He said, right, okay. And he needed a mate to sit in the car with him, and they wouldn't go into that area alone. They would have to have somebody else in the car. And anyway, I took his card off him, and when I left, a few weeks later, rang him up, and he turned up on his own. I said, "You haven't got your mate with you?" And he said, "Don't really need to." He said, "Everything's so much more peaceful at the moment." He had no idea what we were there for or what we were doing. He just drove me to the airport, and that was it.
Well, for you, it must be really interesting because you can see all these little changes that are happening as you are doing this.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It was lovely in Croatia because we had access to newspapers and TVs and things like that. So I made a point of keeping a daily record, as far as I could, of what the newspapers were saying, not about what we were doing, but about the situation. And it correlated with, I kept a record of the numbers of the people joining the group, and you could see this sort of effect expanding. It was great.
That's amazing.
And then you'd hear reports from the locals that, somebody had a vision that, there was these strange people in Pula, was the name of the town, and how they were bringing peace to Croatia and things like that. And so that was great. It's these are nice little asides, but actually just doing the meditation is really enjoyable. So it's great to do it's great to meditate with a large group. It really is. You go very, very deep.
Yeah, tell me a bit about that. What does that feel like? Because I mean, I can't even begin to imagine. I mean, it's one thing to meditate by yourself or in a small group in a in a class or something, but meditating with like 300, 500 people, that must be quite something. So
it really is. Yeah, I mean, it's just, you're meditating to get the sort of transcendental effect, and sometimes, let's face it, you're a bit tired or a bit scatty or stressed or whatever it is, and maybe it seems to be a bit of a strain perhaps, but when you're doing it with a large group, bang, it just happens straight away. Yeah. I mean, to be honest, to be fair, you sometimes fall asleep because your nervous system is so exhausted, and you go really deep very quickly, and so your body's just saying, hey, this is great, I'm going to doze off for a while. And on one or two projects I've been on, I've noticed there's an awful lot of people fall asleep. Now, whether they're still transcending or not, whether they're still doing the job, as it were, I don't know, but
hopefully they are.
Yeah, hopefully they are. Yeah. Yeah, well, hopefully they are. Yeah, but it's like our nervous systems can only take so much bliss. We have to...
we're normally used to suffering. That's our normal.
Yeah, that's true. Honestly, suffering's a habit. So it's a habit you've got to kick.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. Yeah. But when you do the meditation, do you kind of is there this sense of just oneness that you get with everyone? It's like, you can just feel everyone else's zen energy around you. I don't know.
I don't know about zen energy, but I feel, I wouldn't like to put it that sort of starkly, really. I couldn't put it into words. You feel at one with yourself, certainly. And I know some people have some blinding experiences, fantastic experiences, and I've had one or two myself, but I think it's just the sheer joy and pleasure of doing it,
and together,
rather than in fact, I would just say, because it is thoughtless. So it's like when you're thinking, oh, I'm one with the universe, or well, you're thinking that that's not transcending. So it's almost like as soon as you're aware of it, you blow it, but I don't want to share too many of those experiences, because that's sort of private to you when you learn to meditate and you do it yourself. So I think that'd be good. But it certainly, you feel you do feel, Maharishi talks about us being invincible, and you do feel invincible when you're meditating. You know, if so, say that first night when there's due to be an air raid, you know, I was not worried. There was no, it was just a prudent thing to go and, right, I think we should just go and do our meditation. We all sat down and did our meditation. And I was quite happy doing that. I didn't sort of think, oh gosh, I hope this works, or there was no worry, or it was just that
it's like this.
It's almost like, yeah, it's made me understand what, say, Jesus talks about in terms of faith. You know, a lot of people talk about the Christian belief, but actually, as far as I can see, what Jesus talks about is faith. And people make a big emotion of, oh, I've got faith. But actually, faith is the sort of, it's like a superior level of belief. It's, if I said to you, do you believe, oh, of course you're at home now, we're all in lockdown, but you know, if you're in a studio and you want to get home, you're going to get in your car and you'll put the key in the ignition and drive off. And if I asked you, do you believe you can do that? Really? Can you actually do that? You know, you think, that's weird. You know, of course you can do it. I do it every day. It's just, you know, you don't even think about it. And it's faith, I think, is on that very mundane, boring, everyday level. And that's Jesus' idea of faith, that you just have faith that it works. You know, you pray, you ask God for something, and you just accept you've got it. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to think about it. And therefore, yes, we've got faith in the program, the meditation, that you just take it for granted that it works, because it works every day. So, you know, it's like, it is like turning on the light switch. And I often say it's like you can check your watch by it. You know that the result is happening as soon as you start doing it. So.
And I guess you guys have been doing it for such a long time that it's, I mean, it's natural to you. You just know that it works because all the evidence has shown that it works. So there's no doubt.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, some people aren't, so some siddhas aren't as interested as I am in the overall effect. They're just doing it for their own personal evolution. So I wouldn't like to speak for them, to be honest. Yeah, actually, I've not heard anyone dispute that it works, I suppose. Yeah, I suppose we'll take the same view, you know. And some of us are quite new to it, you know. We're not all oldies like me.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's yeah, we need more siddhas though, if anyone wants to join up.
Yeah, definitely. They can get in touch with you, the worldpeacegroup.org.
Yeah.
But how would one even begin to do that? Do you first need to have this type of training for the?
Yes, you do. The first thing to do is to learn to meditate. So if you go online for transcendental meditation, or TM, find there's actually a website that covers the whole of England. Actually, I think it's global now. So you click on UK and you can find your local nearest TM teacher, and they need to be certified or accredited, whatever the word is. But so they're authentic teachers. Yeah, a few other also rounds doing it as well. But go to a accredited one, and it's a very simple process to learn. But they do teach you one-to-one. And then if you're lucky, there may be a group of people or a group of individuals who learned on the same day. So the following days you meet up. So you can share experiences. So you begin to understand. The most difficult thing, I think you already touched on, is understanding how easy it is. So because we're so used to straining and trying and, you know, challenges and all this sort of stuff. And it's, oh really, is that what I'm doing now? Is that actually working? I mean, I would probably say that most of us have experienced the transcendent in our daily lives anyway at some point. TM is about allowing you to do that on a regular basis and on a predictable basis, so you know that you're getting that dose of transcendence twice a day. It's a little bit like trying to live without sleeping, you know. What would life be like if we weren't allowed to sleep? You know, it'd be a nightmare. And I think that for us meditators, we should sometimes think, how do other people live without this daily dose of deep relaxation, which sort of tends to sort so many things out.
Mm.
So anyway, getting back to the point, I do veer off. I'm terribly sorry.
No, that's fine. Yeah.
So the teacher will teach you one-to-one. They conduct puja, which is a short ceremony to thank the tradition of saints who passed this knowledge down through Maharishi to the present day. And then there's the follow-up over a 3 days. So once you've learned, you're on your own, really. You can do it. You're self-sufficient. They ask you to turn up for a check every now and again, just to help you know that you're okay. And then I think you have to meditate for a few months now. Used to be for quite a long time. They would want you to do what they call a rounding course. So you do some extra meditation and yoga asanas and pranayama and things like that. So they train you in that as a prelude to becoming a TM-Sidha. So as long as you're happy with your own practice and you're comfortable with it and it's giving you the desired results, the benefits that we experience from meditation, if you're happy with that, then I don't know how long it takes, 3 or 4 months or whatever it is on your own, then you go on a training course. And I'm not quite sure what it is now, but it's probably about 3 weeks, not necessarily all in one go. You know, sometimes it's several weekends and so on and so forth. And then again, you're on your own. It's not, you know, you don't have to join a club or be part of an organization. You are self-sufficient in your own right. Which is why it's so difficult getting siddhas to get together in a group, because we're all leading our various lives and careers and vocations and things like that, and we're all in different places, we're all scattered all over the place, just doing our own thing.
So ideally, what the ideal would be to be able to have enough funding to actually have to kind of recruit all of these siddhas in one.
That is my objective, really, is to get it treated like a profession, so that you can get enough people together. You can insist that they do turn up at the same time every day. I mean, that's a miracle in itself, getting siddhas to do that. So, because they're very strong-minded in their own ways. You know, I just want to do this, thank you very much. But if you pay them, then they will turn up. And I think we would then also be doing quite long programs of meditation a day. And why not? You know, we pay nurses, paramedics, doctors, and they would be making a valuable contribution to society by doing this. So, you know, why not? I think it's a good idea. That's what I would like to see with a pilot study. You know, get a small group together, reveal what the facts are, what's actually happening in that neighborhood, that area, you know, so much less fatalities, much less incidence of disease, much less hospital admissions. I'm assuming this would be the case with Super Radiance, because as I say, no study's been done on that directly, but there are a number of reasons that would suggest that would happen. For a start, the effect that we have on the rest of the community is a little bit like the rest of the community learning to meditate in a sort of diluted form, that they start experiencing the same benefits. Therefore, one of the benefits of meditation is quite a large reduction in the amount of physical ailments, physical illnesses. There was a study done with an insurance company, and they had a insurance policy group of about 600,000 people, and they were checking their 600,000 for all kinds of different lifestyles. And one of the lifestyles they picked was transcendental meditation. Did they meditate or not? Well, it turned out there were 2,000 people on their books who meditated. So they were able to draw comparisons between the meditators and the non-meditators. So it's a big study, really. And there was an overall reduction in hospitalization costs. It was a medical insurance company. There was no overall reduction in hospitalization costs of 50%. But for infectious diseases, it was 73%. So it was quite high. So you're thinking, right, well, if we're having a diluted effect on the rest of the population, then I would imagine one of the things we're doing is cutting down the incidence of infectious disease. There's a good reason for that. Apart from we're affecting the physiology directly, so as you meditate, you're resting deeper and deeper and deeper, and your physiology, the immune system kicks in and starts fixing things that need fixing. So there's that happening. But then outside of meditation, in activity, because you're less stressed and a bit more coherent, you start making better decisions about your life. You become more aware of, I really shouldn't be eating that food. I really should get to bed before 4 in the morning. You know, you start being a little bit more rational about the way you live. Well, of course, that has an effect on your rate of illness as well. So you've got this sort of dual approach to affecting.
So it benefits you either way. It benefits you
Yes,
before
yeah,
and
that's
after.
right. Yeah.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
think so. I would expect to see that if we did a pilot study, and I think you'd see the local population. You'd have to be careful, of course, because there are other variable factors which we don't necessarily know about. So you've got to take those into account as well. But so I believe that's the statisticians.
yeah. But that would
Yeah.
be really interesting to actually test that, especially now during the whole pandemic. While the pandemic is going on, and to see. So do people have to be together at the same place, or can they
Yes.
do it?
Well, there's the two things that the 1% effect we call the Maharishi effect, because it was Maharishi. Well, he didn't invent it, but he told us about it and said, "Look, this is what you need to be doing, guys." And that's the 1% effect. So if we just get, for Great Britain, for instance, UK, that would be 1% of 60 million. Is quite a lot, isn't it? That's 600,000 people. So we suddenly got to get 600,000 people to meditate. That's probably too much in a year or 6 months, but the square root of 1% for Great Britain is only 750 people. So I'm sure we could collect together 750 siddhas together. There must be that many of us left, and if we paid them, then you'd be having that effect over the whole of Great Britain. But yes, okay, sorry, to answer your question, the meditators, the research has just looked at people meditating in their own homes. So we don't know when they're doing it. I mean, the advice is first thing in the morning and late afternoon, early evening. And I'm sure most people do that most of the time.
Yeah.
But there are people who miss it, who don't do it, or do it earlier or later or whatever. So they're doing it all kinds of random times. Whereas the square root effect needs to be done at the same time. Okay, at the same time, same place. Maharishi actually said if the siddhas do it at the same time every day, but in their own homes, different places, it has something like 70% effect. So if we could, but it's difficult to do. It is very difficult to do. I mean, we call it the coherence time in Britain. It's 6 o'clock in the evening and 8 o'clock in the morning, and I have to confess, I very rarely hit those times. I'm supposed to be doing the yogic flying at that particular time, and I'm not. And I'm sure lots of other people are doing. If you've got to go to work, you've got to do this, got to take children to school or whatever, you caught up. So if you treat it as a profession, say, no, this is what you should be doing, and we'll pay you to do it, then it's a bit like the army. So you just get on and do it.
Yeah, and it makes sense because like you said, we pay nurses, we pay doctors. Why shouldn't we pay people who can improve our lives as well in a non-physical way? I mean, but it also has an effect on the physical.
And it doesn't downvalue what other people are doing. What we're doing is enabling other people to get their jobs done better. We're enabling that situation to happen. There was a nice study up in Liverpool for about 5 years. They had the coherence group for the northwest area, and during that time crime came down about 50% in that area. Now the police and what have you have always denied it's got anything to do with us, but one of their valid objections was, well, yes, but we had this interagency initiative that was helping drug addicts and alcoholics get off. Instead of sending them to prison or whatever it is, we were treating them, and it was working. Well, that's exactly the sort of thing we would expect to see. That at long last, the different agencies, be the social services, the health, NHS, the prison system, and the police, all getting together and actually sorting something out. Without the group coherence, without social coherence, it's very difficult for that to happen. And they're arguing about this, they're fighting over their turf wars. One wants more money, the other wants, they want their money, and they're arguing, and the joint effort doesn't really gel, whereas in that atmosphere it does. It's a little bit like I was saying earlier about meditation works on two levels. You're taking your life in a slightly more rational way, but also your physiology is settling down. Well, we're having an effect on people's stress in society. So the criminals are thinking, I don't have to commit a crime today. It's, I'm going to do something useful. But at the same time, the police and the social services are able to work together better, or they're just doing their job better because they're less stressed. So it doesn't take away other people's value at all. I wouldn't want, we couldn't say, look, let's just shut down the NHS and these guys go and meditate. It'd be a disaster. Just leave it to Jeremy, he'll sort it out for you. No, that's not going to work. We've got to, society is a completely beautiful functioning whole, and at the bottom of it, we just need a few more people meditating to make sure the whole, the wheels go round well greased and oiled.
Yeah, totally. It's almost like it just, I mean, the way I say it, it's kind of like, yes, the doctors and the nurses, of course, they all, make such a huge difference, but they work on the physical level, and then the transcendental meditation works on the non-physical level. But, you need both, isn't it? Because
That's right. That's right.
I guess addressing just the physical is kind of like trying to, clean a window that is already smeared with black. It's like you need another product.
Clean the window with a dirty rag. That's
exactly.
right.
I think that's what's so important, and I think that's what these experiments show, that we exist on a much bigger, on a non-physical level as well, and it definitely has an effect. And actually, this research reminds me of another project that is called the Global Consciousness Project, which is again, it's kind of looked at how we when a big group of people have their attention on one particular thing, that also has an effect on the physical world. And the whole project is basically around that, how it affects the random number generators that they've set up in the experiment. So it's really interesting how it actually works. But I think that proves a lot. So we should definitely start looking at it. But, I wanted to ask you, how did you start in this? What led you to this path of?
I think I was very stressed, to be honest. I was a little bit of a spiritual seeker. There was definitely that there. So when did I learn? 1980-ish. And I'd heard about TM. I wasn't particularly impressed. I wasn't impressed by the Beatles and involvement, and all this sort of stuff. I just thought it was nonsense. But I came across some. I think they were talking about the yogic flying, what we call yogic flying now. So I thought, wow, if they can really do that, that's serious, So and also I was quite impressed that they had a male academy and a female academy. So it was, it was complete departure from this sort of free love and love-ins and all the rest of it, hippie days. So I thought, actually, these guys seem to be taking it seriously. So I did go along to a team centre to learn. I thought I was learning how to fly, actually, but I was sort of very disappointed. But no, I learned. But the primary driver was I was very stressed at the time, and I thought I've got to be able to deal with it somewhere or other, and it worked. So I've carried on doing it just naturally and easily. I got the bug, I definitely got the bug. So I sort of just wanted to keep at it.
What are some of the changes that you saw in your own life? How did it, change things for you?
I would say very slowly. I mean, I'm not one of these people that's had a, massive conversion. You hear people say, I went along, I did it, and wow, suddenly life changed. Well, not for me. It's more I've had almost an intuition that it's good for me. And I look back on my past and I can't believe I'd still be alive if I hadn't learned to meditate. I would have either killed somebody or they would have killed me or something, or I'd have had a heart attack. Or I was so stressed that life was a struggle, and progressively over the years, it's become less and less of a struggle. And I think that's really my main my main benefit. I've certainly had pretty good health all these years. I've had a slight problem recent years, but that was due to an accident. So you know, I'm at an age when most people I know of this age have got problems, and I've got very few problems, and I put it down to the meditation and the Ayurvedic routine as well. So yeah, I hope it continues.
Let me, because you initially got into Ayurveda as well, didn't you? So
I got into Ayurveda as a result of doing TM, because Maharishi, he's spent his life devoted to, well, actually trying to create world peace, and his sort of initial outing, as it were, was to enable people to transcend, to teach them to meditate. But once he'd set up his teaching organization and had taught thousands and thousands of teachers, he then went on to develop other aspects of the Veda. So TM comes from the ancient Vedic tradition, which predates, it's prehistory, really. It goes back thousands of years. And one of those Vedas is Ayurveda. So Veda is knowledge, science. That's the Sanskrit word for knowledge and science. Ayur is life. So it's the science of life. And what he realized that Ayurveda in India had become sort of fragmented in many ways, and a lot of the knowledge had been lost. Or you go to one part of India and you get some aspect of the knowledge, you go to another part and you get another aspect, you don't get that unifying essence. So he felt, right, I'll bring it all together, and he brought together sort of top names in Ayurveda at the time, and said, look, let's create a more unified system of Ayurveda. And they called it Maharishi Ayurveda. And one of the first things they brought out was Panchakarma. Have you ever heard of Panchakarma? I don't know whether. So it's a system of rejuvenation therapies.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Oil massages, steam treatments, and things like that. It's very, very powerful. And I was one of the first people to do it. And, it came over to England and they trained up some people. And, I went along 1986, I think it was. And I can believe it's fantastic. I felt fantastic for months afterwards. I mean, really, really wonderful. And I gradually sort of abused myself enough so I need to go back again and all the rest of it. But I was so blown away with it. I thought, this is marvelous, and they needed help running the clinic where I went, and so I rather foolishly, rashly got involved. But yeah, that was my start with. So Ayurveda for me came after the TM, and Maharishi Ayurveda, the key part of it is the consciousness aspect. So is TM. Once you learn TM, then you are beginning to sort out your lifestyle in such a way, and Ayurveda gives you the guidance that you need to do that. So very important element being the routine. One of your earlier questions was about, how do you ground yourself? Well, having a good routine, whether a meditator or non-meditator, is so powerful in terms of maintaining good health and good mental health. The psychophysiology likes habits, likes routines. That's why we develop habits, so we can do the same thing every day. And the physiology likes that. Yeah. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. No, it's really interesting. It's really interesting because I've kind of, as I mentioned to you before, I've kind of been getting into, well, not getting into, but I've been really interested in getting into Ayurveda, although I haven't yet had a chance.
Do it.
Anything that's kind of alternative therapy, I'm definitely for, because I think there's definitely other ways other than just taking medications and pills to treat ourselves. So I think that's a really good
Yeah,
way
yeah,
of doing
yeah.
it. And
It's
kind of,
Ayurveda is very, very strong on preventative medicine. So it's the old Chinese proverb of, you know, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. You know, that it's much easier to prevent illness than it is to cure it. And so, by having a good routine and a good diet, you can stave off most illness, and keeping your stress levels down. So it's going to bed early, basically, getting up early, making sure you get the right amount of exercise a day, not overdoing it, balancing recreation and work, eating at midday, not last thing at night. There are all kinds of little things which are very natural, which you intuitively agree with and understand when you hear about them. And having a balanced diet as well. Ayurveda talks about 6 tastes, so you've got 6 different tastes. You make sure you get each one of those tastes during the day, so you're not craving for one thing after another. A lot of overweight is due to our dissatisfaction, and we tend to then overeat, and we tend to indulge in one or two particular tastes. In the West, it's sweet, salt, and sour, so crisps and chocolate and things like that. Stuff it all in, and then we get overweight. Whereas if you have the other subtlest tastes, astringent, bitter, pungent, it sort of stops you craving for these foods. That helps, and meditation helps. It's because you're low stressed, you don't tend to overeat. I'm sure there are exceptions, but you know.
Yeah, I'm sure they always are.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting that you said that, because I've kind of recently, well, I guess now that we're all, you know, on lockdown and don't really, we can't really do anything else rather than just stay at home. I have definitely been looking at the balance of my life in general, and kind of, you know, trying to just reassess where maybe my balance is not so good. And last year, for example, I did a lot of work in front of the computer. You know, I was mostly in front of my computer. And
yeah.
when it came to physical exercise or healthy living, healthy eating, I wasn't so much, you know, on top of that. So as a result, at the end of the year, I completely, you know, I had so many health issues, and my mind was just completely I just couldn't do anything because my mind was just in chaos constantly.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it really is. It's so important to have that balance, because otherwise you just can't function as a normal human.
That's
And
right. That's right. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Well done. Do you
So
meditate yourself? Do you meditate yourself?
I do, yeah. I don't do it regularly. I'm trying to get into a routine.
Right.
But I'm trying to experiment with different types of meditations, because kind of just sit. I'm one of those people that, you know, I can't sit still for too long. So
Yeah.
I try to do it with different things, like maybe using crystals or using sound and things like that. I try to implement some other sort of strategy in it so that it keeps me kind of, you know, focused.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some
Okay. Well, try TM. See, you know,
Yeah, I will. I actually
in
will.
your experimentation.
I will. Yeah, yeah.
See how you get on. See how you get on.
That's my next challenge. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I will definitely. It'll be interesting to see the difference between TM and the just regular meditation, which I'm
Yeah.
sure
Yeah.
is
Yeah. Yeah.
huge. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, a lot of other meditations are about concentration or contemplation, and TM is really neither of those two things. I think most other meditations tend to fall into those brackets.
Yeah.
Which is
What do you
why,
think about mindfulness? Mindfulness.
well, mindfulness is, if I'm right in saying, you're putting your attention on yourself or whatever. So it's not the transcending experience, and the transcending experience is, as I say, it's very natural. When you do experience it, having learned TM, you'll begin to think, oh, actually, I have had this before. You know, maybe not, but a lot of people do sort of recognize it. And what TM's enabling you to do is to have it regularly, that experience regularly. So instead of once in a lifetime and then writing reams of poetry about it, it just wonderful pictures, like Blake or Wordsworth or something. You just experience it on a daily basis, and it becomes the stuff of life. So it's very easy. It's very, very easy. That's whenever I hear people talk about mindfulness, there's usually some element of effort, strain, I find it difficult to sit still, things like that. You don't tend to find that with TM. I'm a, or have been a busy person all my life, and sitting down, doing nothing. I remember when I first started, 20 minutes, twice a day. How are you going to do that? And then after a while, I think, only 20 minutes. And now I'm doing city programs, it's a good bit longer, And there are people who are doing the city program, for the best part of the whole day. They're doing it whole day.
Yeah.
On their specialist retreats and things like that. And they're doing it naturally. It's not a forced thing. And if they ever lose interest in doing it, they stop doing it and go off and do something else. It's not so some of these guys have been doing it as long as I've been doing my city program. It's lovely.
Yeah, no, totally. I completely agree. And I think just having those moments of stillness and being able to kind of just step back from the go and the rat race and everything, is just, it makes such a big difference. And you mentioned before that it gives you the chance to kind of think more clearly about certain things, and maybe you get insights into, or answers to questions that you had before that you couldn't quite figure out. And that's one of the biggest things that I've noticed with myself is when I'm struggling with something and I'm kind of like, how do I do this? And, and you keep going over and over again. And then you step back, you do this, 10-minute, whatever meditation. And then all of a sudden, bam, you have the answer. It's like, oh my God.
Yeah. It does. It works like that because you're giving your mind a rest. Giving your mind a rest. And comes back recharged and fortified, and, and often a different perspective about things. And sometimes you're struggling because there's some stress in the way. You can't actually see the obvious, and then remove that stress, and the obvious becomes apparent.
That's the thing. I think probably on a global level right now, we're all finding ourselves in that position where we're not really seeing the obvious when it's right there.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think so. I mean, some people find it very difficult. They can't stay at home, and they've got to have things to do, and my son's a bit like that. And for me, it's an opportunity to do nothing. So.
More meditation.
That's right.
I mean, it's strange. I've kind of been thinking about that, how, right now everything is so divided. There's some people that are, to them this is kind of like a bit of a holiday, like, we're just sitting at home meditating or watching Netflix, or seeing as much as we want. And there are other people who are just going through hell right now, and it's
I can imagine. Yeah. And I find meditation's helped hugely. I wouldn't have handled a situation like this a few years back. I'm sure of it. It would be too much for me. Got to get on, and everyone's trying to stop me. And now I'm just taking it easy. There's stuff I need to do and want to do, but I'm able to relax into the fact that I can't do it. It's not a problem for me. So.
And you can also see it from your sort of from the psychoanalytic perspective, because you also do psychoanalysis, right? So
I don't do psychoanalysis. It's something very different. I'm a psychotherapist. I actually use something called the human givens approach to psychotherapy. So we have an understanding about emotional needs, biological needs, and we work with those particular needs. It's actually very, very effective. I ought to say that psychoanalysis has no real track record of success in treating people. It's talked about all the time. Everyone talks about, psychoanalysis, but you're sort of zeroing in on nothing, and you end up often creating more problems than you're trying to solve. Whereas the human givens approach, it works with the nature of the mind, or the nature of the brain, I should say, rather than mind. So, for instance, it's got a very good, accurate understanding of the stress response, and mental ill health comes from prolonged stress. So you find the stress in someone's life, and you help them switch that stress off in some way, and you help their mental ill health. And stress arises due to a threat. You know what the stress response is. It's, I've either got to kill you, or you're going to kill me, or I've got to run away, and you get terribly panicked, and off you go. Well, these days we suffer from sort of mild stress, but the problem is it's there all the time. And so it builds up, our stress response is active so often. It's driving us nuts, literally. So what's stressing us out? Well, there are threats. Stress is the response to a threat, and the main threat that we know about is if I'm trying to attack you, or vice versa. Okay, but there are other threats in our lives, and what we mean by that is they're threats to our emotional needs. So we have, for instance, a need for autonomy and control over our lives. So it's very important in management circles. If you go and say, right, we're going to start a big change program here, and everything's going to be different, you're threatening people's need for autonomy and control. They want a say in what's going on, and if you don't give them that say, they become angry. And when they become angry, they dig their heels in, they resist, they start sabotaging, or they leave. We need attention from another adult in our life. If we're not getting it, that's a threat to us. You can starve people of attention and they'll go mad. So we need privacy. We need peak experiences and fun. We need, I can't remember now. About 12 in all. We need a good routine, actually. Healthy routine is one as well. And we need to problem solve. That's another thing. We need a sense of achievement. So you're getting all these stuff. So when someone presents to me with a particular problem, they're depressed or they're anxious, things like that, my job as a psychotherapist is to find out, it's not to dig down into their deep and distant past, it's just, right, what emotional needs are being threatened at the moment? And they will come up with one or more, by just talking to you, you just ask the right questions. So when you've identified that, then you think, right, well, why have they got this particular problem? Now, that might be related to past events, in which case, again, they've developed conditioning or phobias, and you can switch those off using hypnotherapy, or what we call guided visualization. So that then releases that particular inhibition, what it is, that problem that's holding them back. So someone, they might be suffering from depression. So you find out during the conversation that they're not getting enough attention from other people around them, that now they're adults, they haven't learned how to get attention. Well, one of the best ways to get attention is to give it, and they don't know how to give it either. So they're isolating themselves. So you help them with their social social activity and encourage that aspect of their lives. And then you might find that there's some conditioning that's inhibiting them. They're very shy because they were laughed at some point in life. Well, we can rewind that particular emotional trauma, remove it, get rid of it, and then that frees them up. So it works very, very fast. If someone comes to a human givens therapist, it should be able to deal with a particular problem like that in one session. It shouldn't be months and months and months of talking about it and, stirring it around and prodding it. You just find out what it is, which is all painful.
Sorry, the state that you're in.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And you see, a lot of people what they're actually paying for is tea and sympathy. They go and see the therapist twice a week, and that person's giving them attention. Well, yeah, okay, but that's not valid. That's not a valid attention you're paying for, or the NHS is paying for it. So you're wearing your therapist out as well. So no, actually what you need to do is, right, how do I get attention from someone? Well, how to give it, do you know how to talk to people? What practice have you had? What training have you had? And if you've grown up in a dysfunctional environment where nobody talked to one another, they just shouted, it's actually very difficult to give and receive healthy attention. So that's the role of the psychotherapist. She's there to give it a nudge, and you can actually then help. And I've done it many times. You help people in one session. You just, wow. I mean, typically people will come to me with depression. They've suffered it for years or months, or they can't get out of it. They're seeing another therapist, things like that, and they go away and they're sorted. It's not me, I'm not a brilliant healer. It's just understanding the nature of how the mind works. And if you understand it, you can fix it. It's a bit like Super Radiance again. It's not magic. It's very practical.
Yeah.
And if you try it out, it works. And well, if it works, then why not carry on doing it?
Yeah, and it's those patterns in the mind, isn't it, that we have, that we could just go over and over again, that we just can't actually see that we are going over and over
Yeah,
again.
yeah, yeah.
So someone external to us tells us that we're going over and over
Yeah,
again.
that's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Hmm. That's really interesting. Thank you for speaking about this, because I think, well, just from what I've generally read, and the number in depression, if people with depression keeps rising, and especially in the UK, I think it's something
Yeah,
like 1 in 4 people now, or something like that, which is
yeah, yeah, yeah.
insane. That and we have everything at our fingertips, and yet 1 in 4 people have depression. So it's so
Well,
serious.
you get depression if you're exposed to stress, threats to your emotional needs for any length of time. It begins to wear you out physically and emotionally, and then what that tends to start happening is it impacts your dream state while you're asleep. And there are two types of sleep really that's important in this case. One is the dream state, which is sort of deactivating the mind, is trying to sort out the stresses. Well, if you're getting very, very stressed, that impinges on your slow wave, deep sleep, which is restorative. So if you're getting yourself in a bit of a tangle over a period of time, you're waking up tired than you went to bed. It's exhausted because you've been reliving what you're going on during the day, and that makes you less able to cope with whatever situation. So you already can't cope with the situation, and now you're less able to cope because you're knackered. So it's a spiral of decline, and as a result, you get into this what we call depression. We shouldn't really call it anything. It's a very temporary state to get into, and giving it the word depression, people tend to think, oh, I'm fixed, this is it, I've got depression, or I am depressed. You're not, you're just suffering from a grazed knee, which will heal over a period of time. Don't worry about it. So enabling people to sleep well, okay, which is a really good reason to learn to meditate, actually, because when you learn TM, you're dealing with those stresses during the day, and you're therefore not taking them into the bedroom when you lie down to go to sleep. So you're getting a better night's sleep. Most meditators I know, they say they sleep like logs. They just no matter what's going on, they sleep. So it's very rarely do you meet a depressed meditator. It's just because that they're getting that luxurious sleep, and it's strengthening them and reinforcing them. So from a psychotherapist's point of view, what you do is you identify what stress is it that's keeping you up at night. These expressions are really valid. So you deal with that, help them with that particular threat in their life. I mean, you can't necessarily remove it, but you can suggest how they might remove it in their lives, or avoid it, or mitigate it in some way, shape, or another. One guy came to me, and he had a psychopathic boss, for bluntly.
As many of us do, I'm sure.
Sorry.
As many people do, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think they do. Well, this guy was a real psychopath. Funnily enough, I treated somebody else who had the same boss, and during the conversation, I said, "Hang on a minute. Do you work at such and such firm?" He said, "Yeah, how did you know?" I've seen the symptoms. Yeah. So, and I said, "Look," I said, "you're never going to change him, and you're always going to." I said, "I can help you with your stress now, but basically, the tiger's in the room with you. Okay, so if you want to stop being terrified, get out of the room. So, and that's what you got to do. You got to go and you got to change jobs." So, yeah. So he left. Yes, so the psychotherapist is in a situation where, because we're not stressed, I mean, at the time, by that particular situation, yeah, hopefully, we're in our rational mind, so we can help them think through problems. And that's the value of having somebody to talk to, so that they can say, well, hang on a minute, the way you're looking at it is in a very stressed way. We don't actually say that, of course, but that's essentially what's happening. You're looking at it in a very stressed way. Let's calm down, and then when we're calmed down, let's have a look at it another way. And they go, oh yeah, that's great. So they can now make decisions.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it's funny that you mentioned that. I kind of recently been quite doing this sort of experiment with myself where I'm trying to, every time I feel something negative, I'll write it down and I'll try to figure out, why I'm feeling this way, or,
Yeah,
what's the story that I'm repeating in my head, mostly
yeah,
from the past. And what I found is that the majority of the time is because it's an old story that I'm projecting from my head, into this present situation. And this story is kind of what I'm projecting is going to be in the future as well, if that makes sense.
yeah,
So it's kind of like this old story that I haven't noticed is repeating over and over again in my head, and then I'm just projecting it into the present and then into the future. And then when I realize that, I'm kind of like, okay, no, this is what's going on. So it's it's just that separation from, I'm here now, this is in the past, I need to stop this because that's not the only way that this could, the situation, current situation
yeah,
can
yeah,
play
yeah.
out.
That's right. Yeah,
And then that makes things so much easier from then
yeah,
on.
yeah.
Yeah.
Is that journaling when you're writing it down, writing the problem down? Is it?
Sort
Is
of,
that?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I'm just kind of noting, yeah, what I'm feeling, and what might have caused it. So is it the current situation, or is it something that has triggered an old memory from
Yeah.
the current
Okay.
situation?
So it's often those old memories, they're emotional memories
Yeah.
that we try and erase. And
Mm,
that might sound a bit draconian, but you're actually only erasing those sort of memories are stored in something called the amygdala, and the amygdala is like the nervous system's early warning system.
yeah.
Um, and what's happening is that, let's say you go through some trauma or mini trauma, and you survive it, okay, especially as a child, okay. So, for instance, a child will be traumatized because dad has suddenly got very angry, starts shouting at the child, right? Now, to the child, its life support system has suddenly turned against it. So it's a life-threatening event. Okay. Well, to dad, he's just, look, will you stop? Mucking about. So
Yeah.
so dad cheers up and goes off and does something else. But what's happening to the child is the amygdala has said, right, that was a life-threatening event, and we managed to survive it because I burst into tears, and daddy sort of calmed down, or I ran under the bed, and dad just stormed off. So I'll do that again, So the amygdala says that was a life-saving strategy. So not only have you got the trauma in that part of the brain, stored in that part of the sort of emotional memory, but you've got the successful strategy. So I had someone like this, and they would get into a row with their husband, and they would run out. They would leave the house. They wouldn't go under the bed because they were too, weren't big enough. But they would do the equivalent. And when she came to see me, we talked about it, and actually that was happening. So I did a what we call a rewind on her for that, and it just removed that particular emotional memory. So it doesn't take away the memory. She's not going around,
Yeah.
like she had a lobotomy or anything. She still remember her past, and whoever it was that was shouting at her, I can't remember, but her father presumably. But it had removed it from the amygdala, and so it was no longer an issue. So she could stand her ground and talk, and not get terribly stressed, because I've made him angry doesn't mean that I'm just about to die, okay, or he's just about to kill me. It's because I've made him angry. We can now talk about it. It makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah, I get that. And it's kind of like, it's more what we make the situations mean to us, isn't it? Based on our past experiences,
Yeah, yeah,
which is
yeah,
not,
that's right.
might not necessarily be the actual reality of the
That's
situation.
right. That's exactly it. Yeah, we're not seeing the reality. A lot
Yeah.
of the time, we're only seeing what we're being. It's our belief system again. Yeah, interfering with what we actually see.
Going back to belief systems, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. From full
Going
circle.
back to the start. Yeah, wow, that's so interesting. Oh man, I can talk about this. I can ask you questions all day about
That's right.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for mentioning that. Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of people listening to this will contribute as well, because I think we can all use with a bit of mind reprogramming right now, because yeah,
yeah.
time of great stress. Yeah. Well, what would you say for people who are now, stressed about their jobs and their livelihood and anything else that's, of course, a lot of us are going through? What might be a practical way of kind of approaching the situation wow, it's happening.
Oh, right.
With the,
I can't think of anything better than just learn how to meditate, because
mm,
then you've got a self-sufficient, practical daily remedy for whatever stresses you're coming up with.
yeah.
It just works so well. I mean, there's no reason not to do it. You know, it's just it's. I do liken it to sleep. It's like someone's complaining to me, "Oh, I'm so tired. What time do you go to bed?" Well, I'm usually in bed by 2. You know. Ah, right. Let's think about that. And what time do you get up? Well, I've got to be up at 6 because, you know, oh, you get 4 hours. 4 hours, that's great, you know. And so we got to work out why you're tired.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I suppose I'm really not getting enough sleep. Yeah, that's really good. So, okay, try get to bed at 10. Now, actually, it's more complicated than that because they got into the habit and blah, blah, blah. But what's missing there is that necessary rest. Okay, well, in today's troubled times, you know, we're getting stressed a lot. 8 hours sleep isn't enough. We need that transcending experience. And you go down into a state of deep rest within that 20-minute period, which is twice as deep as the deepest sleep you get at 2 o'clock in the morning. If you get to bed at 10, I mean. So if you've been asleep 4 hours, right, you get to a really deep level of sleep, of rest. If you're meditating for a few minutes, you get down twice as deep as that. Okay, much, much deeper. And that's measured in oxygen levels and heart rate and heartbeat and all this sort of stuff. So you're really, really rested. So it's then lifting stress off you. And that's the most practical thing I could possibly suggest to people. It's so easy. You just toddle along to a TM teacher, they teach you, get on your bike and ride it, and you've got it for good, you know, for the rest of your life. It's marvelous.
Well, I'm sold. I'll definitely try it.
Okay.
Get into it. Yeah, it's on my list of things to do now.
Okay.
But yeah, is there? Well, yeah. I wanted to ask you, where do you kind of see? What's your vision of this? You know, with the World Peace Group, with the transcendental meditation. What do you envision? What do you want ideally to happen with this?
Well, what I'd like to do is the person who I wrote to in the government kind of said, what a really good idea. Look, it's a bit odd, so let's just try it. Okay, let's just try it. And I think I need about 140 people, actually. And so that should work. And then we'll do that for, say, 6 months or whatever it is, look at the results. And then that lead to a slightly bigger project, I think. And then build on that. Because wouldn't it be great if Great Britain had, well, we need 10,000 for the whole world. So we had 10,000 sit down. We're going to train a few people up, I suppose, or invite them to come to the country. But if we had a group of 10,000 in the country, that'd be fantastic. We'd be solving the whole world's problems. I have to say that we've only had a world peace group. That's not mine, by the way. Maharishi set up a group in India back in 1989. 1988 he started it, and it was there for about 4 or 5 years. And during that time, the Soviet Union collapsed. That whole empire just. And I remember that happening. I remember the lead up to it and all the rest of it as the group solidified and came together. Apartheid disappeared. The Mozambique war stopped. It had been going on for 21 years. Just peace just broke out across the whole planet.
While they were doing the transcendental meditation.
Yeah, but by the Super Radiance Effect created for the entire globe, with in those days 7,000 Indian Pundit boys. Yeah, wow. Yeah, they were training up at his school, and he got them all to do it together every day. That's fantastic effect. Fantastic effect. And we need the same again, and it will blow all the cobwebs away. Yeah. That's my ultimate vision, but it's, you know, not necessarily me can do it, but that's what we want.
Yeah.
And it all starts with pilot study. 140 people.
140 people. I mean, that's not a lot of people to get.
No, I think I'm sort of for the sort of Dorset area, I reckon the square root of 1% is about 80 people, I think, roughly. But I would need more than that. I mean, people have to go away for days, you know. they need a day off or whatever. I mean, they won't stop meditating, but they won't necessarily be able to do it. They need to go and visit someone. So I've got to allow a little bit more. And also, we are part of a larger collective consciousness, aren't we? Part of Great Britain, part of Southern England. And there's a lot of interaction between the two. It's not like we're not like a nice little island tucked away here. So I would like to see about 110, 140 people, Siddhas together, get them doing it, look at the results, convince the government that actually if they could fund a larger group, say for the whole of Britain, which is only 800 or 900 people, it would, I mean, they've got concern about the coronavirus epidemic, but now there is now a growing concern about the economy once this is over. That it'll take us back to the depression. Well, depression is just a word to us, but the people had to experience it in the States in the 20s. It was terrible. It was really, really bad. It was a very nasty time to be. So we don't want that. They would like to see the economy bounce back. Well, if you had a coherence group for the whole country, it would, because although I've focused a lot on the negative social trends, we also have monitored positive social trends, things like patent applications, economic activity, gross domestic product, all these things go up. Even the weather changes. I mean, there was Mozambique created a group towards the end of, it ended the civil war. We had the global group, and President Chissano created his own group of Siddhas down in Mozambique. It completely transformed the country with 25-year civil war ended almost overnight. They all became best buddies, and it was remarkable. And there'd been a drought for about 20 years. Well, that stopped. They had sort of, a million point inflation, all the rest of it. Well, that stopped. They were completely dependent on overseas aid for food, and that stopped. That started growing things again. The whole thing just turned round. Similar situation in Cambodia after the terrible communist regime there. And both these examples are in the book. It goes into some detail. They're fantastic opportunities. And then two other countries where we've got a 1% effect, 1% of the population were meditating, Norway and New Zealand. Now they're normal economies, Western economies, but they resolved their national debt during that time. Unemployment went down, gross domestic product beat other countries, and I think there was a net inflow of investment into the country. The whole thing sort of boosted up. It's very interesting that those countries are both very low on coronavirus. I think New Zealand's only had 2 deaths.
Oh, really?
So, something like that. So, there's another indication that meditation might be at work there. But I don't know how many meditations they've got at the moment. Those studies were back in the 80s, I think, or 90s, some while ago.
Wow, that's pretty powerful. So where are the biggest groups right now at this moment? I think you mentioned South America.
South America, I think Colombia and Brazil and possibly Peru. I think they're mostly school children, and the education systems in those countries have taken TM on board. And then you've got tens of thousands of children meditating. You get a number who do the TM-Sidha program as well. So So they've got. I don't know much about them, so I don't know whether it's a formal group or whether they're just lots of them doing it. And then you've got to take into account the school holidays where they go home and they're not doing it in quite the same way, perhaps together, that they do during the term time. So I don't know what's happening there. And then there's a group of, I think, 2,500 pundits in India. They are Brahmin pundits. They're carrying out the Vedic chanting as well as doing their city program twice a day. And then MIU, the university, Maharishi's University in America, I think there's about 1,000 people there doing it.
Wow.
So
That's pretty, And how long do they have to meditate for, at least? How many days? Is there a minimum, maximum? that if we were to get together a group here of 140 people, how long do they have to meditate for minimum where we can start to see the effects?
Oh, I'd say, yeah, because you wouldn't be able to tell the results after a day or something.
Yeah.
Although, so the effect does start happening straight away. I would think we would need a 6-month study, but you could start monitoring results after the first week, couldn't you? You could just see what was happening. You can't always rely on it necessarily going down. I remember the Washington course in the first couple of weeks, I think the violent crime rate went up. Anecdotally, we don't really know why that happened, but anecdotally, drug dealers started shooting one another because the drug consumption, recreational drug as they call it, drug consumption started going down, and they thought other guys were stealing their, it was a turf wars thing. It was gang on gang, but also there was instance of one crazy guy went in and shot 5 people in a playground or something like that. It's America. So I do feel it's difficult. Also, at the time, the graph for the crime rate was going up and up and up and up and up and up and up, and it was soaring. It was particularly bad in Washington. So it sort of went up for a couple of weeks. I think there were 500 or 600 people there. Then as the numbers grew, it gradually came down again. And then for the full month project, the overall figures were that there was a 20% reduction. So
that's pretty
and then the crime carried on up when everyone left. It sort of slowed down for a little while, but then it carried on. So there was like a blip in its trajectory. And some people say, oh, it doesn't work. Well, no, obviously it doesn't work because we're not there. It only works if we're doing it. So you don't want to close, you set a group up and it should be there permanently. Maurice used to send groups into hotspots, but after a while he realized, we have an effect, but then we pull everybody out and
goes back to
so he felt actually we should focus on individual countries sorting their own stuff out, and getting their own groups together, and build on that. So it's a permanent thing.
Only if something could just be organized where people could just meditate and everything gets better. Wow. So tell me about, I'm interested to know, what are some of the if they ever did respond to you, the governments that you have submitted these statistics to, has anyone ever replied, and if they did, what did they say about that?
Well, it depends who you're talking to. I'm not the only person that will have written to them. In the past, you sometimes get individuals who are quite sympathetic and understand it, but then they're a little bit frightened of talking to the guy above them or somebody in another department. Oh, I've met this guy who says if we all meditate, everything's done out all right. Oh yeah, right. How long do you want to work here for? So it's you can imagine. I feel sorry for them. It's like you're giving an offer they can't refuse, and actually the problem is there are consequences in refusing. I've seen that before. I think so, because it's like nature's offering you this gift and you're saying no thanks. So we'll just see. I think times are changing, and the powers that be are a little bit more open to I'd say alternative ideas, but different ideas. They're not stuck in quite the same mold. Lots of people are talking about these sort of things. Well, lots of those people will actually work in the government or work for some government department or whatever. It's not as freaky as it was, say, 30 years ago. And times are changing. Consciousness has lifted. So it's like more fertile soil for these seeds to fall into. So although I'm not holding my breath, I wouldn't be at all surprised if I do get invited, because I think things are changing. It's got to change sometime. So why not now?
Exactly. Now I think it's the perfect time as well.
Yeah, it is. I mean, they're stuck with this awful problem, and whichever way you're going to do it, people are going to die, and they're going to spend an awful lot of money which they haven't got. And we're going to sort that out. And we'll get over one problem and it'll land us with another. And then that'll spiral, because just this week, the statistics are coming out that more people are dying of other problems as a result of the coronavirus epidemic, because all resources and time and effort and energy, the NHS are going into trying to solve one problem, and whoops, something coming up somewhere else. So, hey, we've got to dampen it down somewhere.
Yeah.
And,
use all of our resources.
yeah, one of our resources is our underutilized TM-Sidha. So.
Yeah. Wow. Well, we have to get the word out. You know, more people have to know about this, so they
Well, I don't know if you know anyone in the government, but you know, Boris Johnson might be open to talking about it now. But
yeah, now that he's experienced it. Oh God.
Yeah,
Yeah.
can't be very pleasant. Can't be very pleasant at all.
Wow. Well, okay, again, I'm gonna, if anyone does want to join, they just need to get in touch with the worldpeacegroup.org. So you need 140 people to start off with, right? And then transcendental.
Well, I need 140 trained siddhas. I can't train people up. Well, that'd take months anyway. No, I'm sure what I want to do is recruit, from our network of TM-Siddhas around the country, and hopefully we would get enough people interested, but they would need to be paid. I can't run a project. They've got to leave homes, they've got careers, they might have careers at the moment, but they've got their other responsibilities. They can't just leave them. And also we need it for a period of time. It would be no good for a week or 2 weeks. We'd need it for a stable period so that you could see a definite trend. I say that, look at any graph, it's like this, isn't it? It's not straight, so you hit it at the wrong moment, it looks like it's going up, but you get the pattern, it'll gradually go down. So over a 6-month period, I think that would be enough. But hopefully during that time they will see trends occur. And then as you need a larger group, well, then possibly we could afford to try and train people up, and it could become a career. So you say, right, join up, and I'm going to do this for 3 years of my life or whatever. And
maybe this will be the new career, that comes out of the pandemic. The new type of,
like you join the army, don't you? You sign a contract, you sign up for 3 years. So they spend a lot of money training you, and then they've got you for 3 years. I think,
yeah, why not? I mean, the government spends money on all types of other things that we don't actually need. So
well, they spent was it 3 billion quid or something on a aircraft carrier? Hasn't got any aircraft. I mean, you can't think of anything more stupid. It's like having without a rudder. It's just daft. And well, we would need 300 million quid, I think, to fund a world peace group. It's a tiny amount. I think one stealth bomber would is more expensive than what we need to create world peace for.
The money's definitely there. It's just getting it.
That's right. They've got it when they want it. They figured out 400 million quid for something the other day, and I thought, God, dear me. Just do with a couple of £1 million to run this project, just to show it. And the thing is, actually, they shouldn't need to run a pilot study because the evidence is already there. But I quite understand, if you're a government, you're running government departments, you need to see it for yourself. You need to get your hands dirty and sort of touch it and feel it as much as you can. So if they were part and parcel of helping to set it up and monitoring the results, then at the end of it, they would have the evidence they needed to release further funding. So that's the idea.
Well, let's hope.
Yes, let's pray.
Let's meditate on that. Jeremy, it's been such a pleasure to have you.
It's been lovely talking to you.
It's been it's just such an important topic, and I'm sure more of this will be coming out. I'm sure more people now becoming a lot more aware, like you said, consciousness is rising. So I think a lot of people also feel that it's just time that we kind of wake up and just realize, the potential that we have with our minds, with our consciousness and everything. So thank you so much. Again, if people want to contact you, they can visit www.worldpeacegroup.org. And there's also a Facebook group under the same name, I believe.
It's not quite the same. It's World Peace Project, I think. World Peace Project on Facebook, And if they want to learn TM, Just there's, I think it's Transcendental Meditation. It might be tm.org. But if they go online, they'll see it, and then you just click on the appropriate. I think it says my local teacher or something. It's got up there. So if you click on that, you'll find out. Put your postcode in, and there'll be a teacher, hopefully in your area, and you just toddle along and off you go.
Jeremy, thank you so much. Have a good day.
Thank you very much, Desi. Lovely to meet you.
You
Yeah.
too.
Bye bye. Bye bye.